Hare Krishna. Welcome to our podcast, Bhakti as It Is, the Science of Living. In this episode, we would like to introduce the distinction between Vedic culture and Vaiṣṇava culture. I believe there is a lot of misconception in regard to these issues, and because we don't have quite clear which one is which one, sometimes we could have a tendency to think that it's the same. In general terms, of course, people refer to the scriptures or even sometimes the writings of Śrīla Prabhupāda. As we read, sometimes he refers to the Vedic culture, and sometimes he refers to the Vaiṣṇava culture. Now, if we are to do a study of it, we could easily understand and arrive at this understanding that every time Prabhupada refers to the Vedic culture, at least most of the time, he's referring to the varnāśrama system, because that's where the Vedic culture is. The Vedic culture is the discipline for humanity, so that everybody could go about life, go about their business, and be moving towards Krishna. It is from Bhaktivinoda Thakur giving the task to his son Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, who said, it is difficult for people to observe varnāśrama dharma, so we must do daiva varnāśrama. And he said, it is your task to disseminate. And Śrīla Prabhupāda received that similar instruction from his spiritual master Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, and therefore Śrīla Prabhupāda was, for most of the whenever there are explanations on varnāśrama, he's referring to daiva varnāśrama. Now we must understand that the term Vedic culture refers to this varnāśrama system. Now the varnāśrama system, Prabhupada refers to it as the first step in humanity. So he describes that people cannot be called humans if they have not yet created this subdivision of the living entities into these chaturvarnyam maya shristan, into these four, primarily these four subdivisions that Krishna says he has created. Due to the three modes of nature, we actually have people that have a tendency to be intellectual, people that could do administrative work, government work, and people that has mercantile tendency, and then you have the artisans. So these characteristics that exist, as Śrīla Prabhupāda said, you don't have to create or manufacture. This exists. People are born. They were being born like this 5,000 years ago, and they still are born like that. At present, people are born with these natural tendencies. Of course, at present, they may be a little bit mixed up because of the continued mixing of the castes and the divisions, and therefore a person who likes music, he also likes sport, and he also likes different things. So for instance, when we read in the Vedic literature, if we read the Mahabharata, we find that Arjuna was a person that was not, during his training, during his education, when the Guru asked the different Kauravas and Pandavas to shoot the bird on a branch of a tree, he asked them, what are you looking at? And they would describe the forest, the trees, and he said, no, next. And he went through the Kauravas and the Pandavas until he got to Arjuna, and he said, Arjuna, what do you see? He said, the neck of the bird. What else do you see? The neck of the bird. What else do you see? The neck of the bird. So he said, shoot. So he shot. So that gives us an example of a person that is an archer and is dedicated to practicing. It is explained even that he discovered that his brother Bhima was eating at night, and he said, how do you eat? You don't see nothing. But because Bhima was an eater, he didn't mind that it was dark. So he thought, if my brother can eat in the darkness, I can practice shooting arrows in the darkness. So this is only to show that the individuals have the purer the individual in regard to the mixing of caste and races and costumes and cultures, the more individualized, you could say, is his activity or his capability for dedication, for focus, whereas the more you dilute this, the different kinds of living entity, the more diluted the person is, so their minds are dedicated to all sorts of things. And so the Vedic culture is a culture that has been created by the Supreme Lord. Perhaps created is not the right word, because this always exists. Every time there is every time the creation is manifested, the very same things appear. Of course, perhaps not in Satya Yuga, because in Satya Yuga there is only one division, Hamsa, pure division, everybody's perfect. But then from then on, the other three eras, the people is born with different characteristics and qualities, and therefore they must perform different duties. But if you actually read the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna tells Arjuna a lot of the time, you can read it a lot of the time, never abandon your prescribed duty. Even he says, even I do prescribed duty. And at the end of the Bhagavad Gita, in the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, destruction is better. I don't know if that is a famous verse, sva-dharma biguna. Biguna means with defects. So you must perform your prescribed duty, even if you perform it full of defects, rather than perform the duty of another. So this Vedic culture is where people can learn what the duties are for their nature and for the type of work. Now, we are speaking about Vedic culture. If we refer now to Vaiṣṇava culture, a Vaiṣṇava culture, I would say the best example is, let's say, Rupa Goswami and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, of course, who could not really function in society because he was just thinking, oh, Krishna, where is Krishna? I don't want to do nothing but Krishna. And let's say Srila Rupa Goswami, once he was given the task to write the instructions that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave him, we know that he wrote the Ujjvala Nilamani, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Upatishamrita. He was just sitting writing, and he wouldn't take time to do anything other than writing all these instructions. So it is described that when he needed to put some food in his stomach, he would just go around the Jagannath Puri temple and take some rice from the drains. So he wouldn't even waste time in cooking or going to beg for food. So you can see that Vaishnava culture, there is nothing but Krishna. The persons do not see anything but Krishna, do not do anything but whatever activity give pleasure to the Supreme Lord. Because most of us, and I am being general here, most of us are not on that level. So Krishna has given this discipline of life so that we can direct ourselves towards that level. And the discipline of life is called Trivarga sadhana. Now, that means Dharma, Artha, Kama. Of course, once we really enter into try to understand Vedic culture, it is really four of them, Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. And if we have studied the literature, we will understand that Bhakti, devotional service, pure devotional service to the Supreme Lord, unmotivated and uninterrupted, is the fifth goal of life. So the Trivarga Sadhana, or this discipline given to humanity, are the first four goals of life. And Vaishnavism is the fifth goal of life. A little bit like if we talk about sannyas, a sannyas is let's say, the fourth stage of life. It's not the first, it's not the second, it's not the third. So sometimes, for instance, our movement has suffered and struggled because the renunciation of a sannyas, which is to end life and go back to Krishna, is taught to a brahmachari who is going to live life, and therefore is incorrect. The renunciation that is taught to the brahmachari is for him to be prepared for life, so be detached, to learn to control his mind and his senses so he can have a full life. Ideally, some stay with the guru, some go and get married, so when they are married, they are in control of their mind and senses, so they could have a great grihastha life. And when they get to 50, they could start separating from Grihastha life. And by the time they get to 75, they can not having anymore the drives of a young person. It's so easy to start getting out of material life. So Śrīla Prabhupāda sometimes refer to brahmachari, grihastha, vanaprastha, and devotional life, because Vaishnavism is a moment in which there's nothing else, no other responsibility, no other task, no other duty other than whatever pleases Krishna. Because many of us are not at that level, so we could benefit from understanding the system that Krishna has given for our social and spiritual progress, instead of going to demoniac institutions to learn demoniac systems which are using demoniac jobs. We could actually utilize the social structure given by God rather than to use the social structures that are at present fashionable in the culture of present-day society. So if we're going to establish, for instance, a social structure in the International Society for Krishna Conscious, or in any spiritual movement for that matter, instead of creating or using the systems, the ideologies that the demons have popularized in the world, we must use the system that God has given. And God has given the varnāśrama dharma system, Daiva varnāśrama, as Krishna says to Arjuna in the third chapter. The 8th chapter is the verse 7, where Krishna says to Arjuna, fight and think of me. So there you can have, then if you pay attention, means go fight. Why he has to go fight when he wants to do spiritual life? He has to go to fight because that is his duty. But what kind of duty? Is that a Vaiṣṇava duty? That's not a Vaiṣṇava duty. That is a varnāśrama duty. Arjuna was a warrior, and he was a married warrior. So he has to look after his wife and children, and he has to go to battle. That is his Vedic culture position. And what is his Vaiṣṇava position? So whatever it is that he does, he must do it for Krishna. That is the Vaiṣṇava position. So it is very important to understand this difference. Like, we are people that's trying to assimilate the Vedic culture. So what is the Vedic culture? Where you must have these 4 goals of life: dharma, artha, kama, moksha. Okay, so for instance, Krishna tell Arjuna, never abandon your duty. He tells him, never stop performing your duty, even if you perform it wrong. Destruction is better than performing your duty. But Krishna is not teaching Arjuna his duty. So where is that there is education on what is my duty we can find? Where can we find this education on what my duty is? What are the elements of my duty? Where am I going to go and learn my duty? So for instance, in the case of Arjuna, who was a military man, he had to go and learn from the Guru the art of war. So he went and studied Raja Dharma. So that is not a Vaiṣṇava culture, that is Vedic culture, and therefore he had a guru who taught him his prescribed duty. So once he knew his prescribed duty from childhood to adulthood, he was trained in military, how to defeat, how to strategies for war. And then we come to the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna tells Arjuna, perform your duty. So for instance, Śrīla Prabhupāda describes, I believe is in chapter 2, the verse 31, where he describes that before liberation, a person must perform his prescribed duty. And after liberation, the person perform his prescribed duty, but this time that prescribed duty has become Sanatana Dharma. So before liberation, that duty is varnāśrama Dharma, which means it's your social duty. But once you surrender to Krishna, you perform the very same task, but for the pleasure of Krishna. And therefore now this task is purely spiritual, which is what Krishna asked Arjuna to do. So then it is important to differentiate between Vedic culture and Vaiṣṇava culture, so we don't think that is one and the same. And in that way we will be able to advance, to make progress. We as Westerners do not understand the difference, but sometimes, let's say, Hindu people that has been born in India or are descendants of Hindu people, they do understand varnāśrama because they have a long line of people that has observed the same job, the same task, the same. I believe all over the world there are similar things, but in India is very pronounced. Less now as Kali Yuga advances, but you can still find persons that had, let's say, musician. His father was musician, the grandfather was musician. When I lived in Mayapur, the chap that cut my hair, he was a hairdresser, but his father was hairdresser, his grandfather was hairdresser, and he told me my great-great-great-grandfather used to cut the hair of the Raj, the British Raj, hundreds of years ago. So the man was very proud that his son was 14 and he was about to start his career as a hairdresser. So you can see that this element of the varnāśrama in the Indian people sometimes is a very natural thing, and sometimes we Westerners don't understand. So that when they say, for instance, oh, Saturday I'm going to do Hanuman Chalisa, oh, who is Hanuman? Or let's say Shivaratri, how can you worship a demigod? We Westerners don't worship demigods, but actually we Westerners worship rock and roll stars and football stars. So it's a difference between worshiping demons and chanting Hare Krishna and worshiping devas and chanting Hare Krishna. So that's why Śrīla Prabhupāda told us that to the Westerner and to the Hindu, you must preach differently, because the person that was born in India might have a lot of varnāśrama already in their culture, in their upbringing, and the person from the West don't know what he's looking at, and he's trying to take it out of the Hindu. Oh, no, abandon that and take what? Rock and roll and football. So this is a big problem that we are encountering in the Western world with the, let's say, the Indian youth, as we tell them not to worship demigods, which is actually the duty of the merchants. For instance, if you read the instructions for the Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra, it is the instructions for the Vaishya to worship demigods and to give donations, of course, to the Brahmanas and all those other duties that are there. But all this to say that as we enter into the Krishna Conscious movement, as it is a Vaiṣṇava movement, we might miss this element, which is the Vedic culture, as being different from the Vaiṣṇava culture. And therefore it is important that we pay attention, because at some point we're going to, let's say, as brahmacharis, we stay 5-10 years brahmachari, and then we go and get married. When you go and get married, how are you going to be a married man? Where are these duties explained? Are you going to live with a wife for, let's say, 25 years minimum? For instance, what is your duty as a husband? And what are the duties of a wife? These duties are explained and are described perfectly by Krishna in the Vedic culture. And therefore we don't need to invent, we don't need to manufacture, and we don't need to observe what the people outside observes, but we should actually rather go to the system that Krishna has given and utilize Krishna's system. Krishna, if you read the father of humanity as Lord Manu, another Mahayana's grandfather Bhishma, if you read the instructions of Manu and Bhishma, you will find that these descriptions are given for the happiness and prosperity of the living entity and the spiritual advancement. Śrīla Prabhupāda described that in the purport to his Bhagavad Gita, chapter 1, verse 40, when he says, good population is the base of a good society. And he says there, if with good population, people will have happiness, prosperity, and spiritual progress. So sometimes the devotees complain that they are struggling through life, but it is described that in that purport that prosperity comes from good population. What is good population? Śrīla Prabhupāda described a responsible boy and a chaste girl will make very good population, which will be able to fulfill the human mission. And that was today trying to emphasize the difference between Vedic culture and Vaiṣṇava culture. Thank you for listening. If you have a topic, that you would like me to deal with, please write it in the comments. Hare Krishna.